ancient Kemet, Ma'at, right? Start off with Ma'at, defining what Ma'at is. Okay. You want to tell me what Ma'at is defined as? Order? Okay, we got order. That's one definition.
Law.
Order, law. Order, law. Anything else other than that?
True.
Truth. That's another definition.
Sound right reasoning.
Is it? Sound right reason?
Sound right reasoning.
Might go out. That, and it's funny how you mention that, sound right reasoning. Semitic cat, is if you go to an old tape, not really old, but it's still 15 years, so that's pretty much an old tape. You go back to a tape called Mysteries of Egyptian Ma'at, and he talks about the quill, the quill feather that your heart is weighed on. He said that is literally what Nuwapu stands for. That's the, if you were to have a physical manifestation of what Nuwapu is, it would manifest as Ma'at. Because it symbolizes order, law, truth, justice, sound right reasoning. Because if I'm just dealing with, let's say, what is sound right reasoning? Nuwapu is literally in a square root, sound right reasoning. What is the square root of Nuwapu? Sound right reasoning. How is that? Because if I'm dealing with right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding, which leads to, that means that you're dealing with all three. I heard someone say before, we're still in right knowledge. I said, you're still in right knowledge because that's what you choose to be. You know what I'm saying? Where you exercise right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding, depending on self. What is right wisdom? We mostly say, well, that's right knowledge. We don't say what is right wisdom. Right wisdom is how to use the information or the information that you attain. So, and what is right understanding? Right understanding is knowing how to convey the message that you've just learned how to apply to yourself. That's how you know you understand something, you're able to teach it to somebody else. So, Ma'at, if realizing you had laws of Ma'at, and in different nomes, depending on who was already invaded, the laws at some point got corrupted. Remember, at some point you had, and some people who teach ancient Kemetic science, there's an ancient law that says that homosexuality is literally not permitted in ancient Kemet, in ancient Africa. So now what's going on is you're having a problem with blacks who've literally been not infiltrated to the most part, but mostly influenced to teach that in ancient Africa, homosexuality existed. And the first thing you have to do if you're using sound right reasoning is you ask them, can you produce the evidence? That's it. And I've asked people several years, can you produce evidence that this existed? Someone tried to say it was the Grimaldi tribe. And I'm like, I look up the Grimaldi tribe, the Sans people, the Khoikhoi of South Africa, who was actually mostly extinct because of European colonialism. In their ancient texts, ancient families, they don't deal with men on men sex, women on women sex. And then just the word I use, sex. The word sex is defined by woman and man procreating. That's what sex is. when you deal with a man and a man and a woman and a woman, that's not sex. That's what perversion is. You do understand that in European society, they've just now defined male on male and woman on woman sex as sex. But that wasn't even considered to be sex for years. For hundreds of years, thousands of years. You gotta understand, if we're really gonna start really, not so much attacking, but addressing what's going on with our family, then you have to be able to produce evidence of what's going on with our people. See, because right now, it's now becoming an influence. See, what people will do is they'll point to a stela on the wall, and it'll say, well, he has a phallus in his hand, and it shows Haru, and then there's a stela that says that Haru and Set was trying to rape Haru. I said, first of all, and I remember going back and forth with a brother about this at least 2 years ago. What you have to understand is that once Ptolemy came in, once you have a new kingdom in a situation of old and middle, that was literally zero evidence of homosexuality going on. You have an influence of white power. What you have is you're going to have stelas, you're going to have glyphs that are going to show European influence and European stories. How do you know that? Because when I read the story, it says Horus and Set. We didn't say the words Horus and Set. We didn't say Horus and Set. You got to understand again, as we say before, when Europeans come into our land, they try to say certain words. They have to pervert the words into a European tongue. So when you get words like Horus, Set, and Hermes, you get bastardized ways of saying ancient African deities. So what we have to do is we have to be honest with ourselves and say, well, even if that's on the walls, exactly whose influence was this? Because once you deal with 6,000 years, when we left the immigration laws, we let a lot of information in that was not us indigenously. That's a problem. And so you get a culture that is a mix. That's why when you look at certain movies where they have whites in control of ancient Kemet, they're sticking to the Ptolemy era. The only difference is when they try to paint Imhotep white, they're lying. When they try to paint Haru and Acid as white, they're lying. If they were intellectually honest and historically honest, then they can go to certain parts and say, okay, they begin to light up because of mixture. Right, that makes sense. But let's not try to whitewash the whole situation, because then you'd be lying, which is what they're trying to do. They're just basically lying. So what I want to do is speed up. What I'm going to do is speed up and go into slavery, because slavery is a really key component as of another way of how the black family was destroyed, of course. Because if you remember, slave masters did not want the slave man and the slave woman to procreate without them giving permission to. You see what I'm saying? They did not want man and a woman to show affection outwardly. You understand? So what they began to do was, if they showed that this, because they could have came off the ship, you know, you had all the men in one area, you had all women in one area, right? But the person already still knows who their wife is by, you know, you already know, because you're spiritually and physically connected to somebody. If you showed that you were with that person and you showed some type of affection, you will be killed for that. So what we had to do was find other ways, but what influenced the other ways and destroyed the other ways of showing affection was rape by slave masters on the ship and off the ship on the plantation. I'm talking about rape onto men. Slave masters raping slave men, African men on the slave ship and getting off the slave ship. You understand what I'm saying? And even the children, you know, because it's funny, because now a lot of us are using the movie Goodbye Uncle Tom as a good historic, because that movie was going by historical evidence that Europeans came in and wrote down and documented that they had pedophilia camps where slave children were being molested by white men. And they were being bought out as literally prostitutes. Our children were being bought out as prostitutes. I mean, they weren't just breeding camps for slaves. They created them as like carnivals for slave children to be bought and sold to perverts of the Caucasian race.
Like they still doing today.
And then you exactly, and you see the influence of this becomes a part of what becomes the landscape of the black community, the black church. Because the white reverend or pastor was molesting the children and raping the men also in the church. That's why if you notice, we always talk about the homosexual population being created in the prison, but we never talk about what goes on in the black church. We never expose it. We never pull up the garment and say, this is what the slave master has influenced on our people. You understand? That's slavery. I just sped up. I went from the Ptolemy era to slavery. Now what I'm going to do is, and then let's deal with the Wayland's letter. How making the woman independent of the male slave. We need to make the independent woman, and but what we need to do is take the man and we need to effeminize him, make him literally an effeminized male, that he no longer has purpose. Because as a slave, what purpose do you have other than other than a woman being a better witness to a slave? I mean, to a slave master, and the man being a buck and working the field. What other purpose do you have? And if the slave woman is being sexed by the slave master, and the only way you can come together with that woman is to have a child, keep breeding, you really don't have a wife. You're a slave, sexually and physically to a white man. So also the perceptions coming in when the woman's seeing this. So she no longer sees you as being her actual counterpart. She sees you as literally being someone who's weak. And it's no longer about what created the problem. It's the fact that at the end of the day, you didn't rise up and go against your oppressor. You understand? So, and then I'll speed up even further and going into, I'm going to keep jumping back and forth, but I want to point out certain things. What we tend to do now as black people, we tend to try to tack on or cling on or staple ourselves to any movement we see. We tack ourselves on to, what's this? And I noticed this. LGBT community. LGBT, lesbian,
Lesbian, gay.
Right. Lesbian, gay, bisexual,
Transgender.
and transgender, right? And you have a lot of sisters. You have a lot of sisters sisters and brothers that are very much pro for them, but they're not pro-black. I find that very odd, right? And also you have situations where, because this situation or this organization is funded and still funded by the feminist movement, white feminists. And the white feminists were created and are still supervised by the Zionist movement, what we would call the Illuminati, from the Rothschilds, Rockefeller, Weisfolds, Blavatsky. And these same people also, side note, created the NAACP. Two Jews, two Zionists created, along with W.E.B. Du Bois, the NAACP. This is historical fact. But to go to the point, if you look into the proselyte Jew or those who call themselves Jews, the Ashkenazims and the Sephardim. If you go online and you look up what's called the Talmud gives permission to adult women and men of that same group to have sex with underage children. This is in their book. It's in their holy book, the Talmud. Look up the Talmud. You get a chance, go online. It's a website that talks about how it's permissible for their race, the Jew race, if they want to call themselves, those who call themselves Jews, the fake Jews, they say that they can be as young as 9 years old, you can have sex with them. And what people don't understand is, these are the same people who have what they call gay day in Islam. The proselyte Jews and the pale Arabs, nothing but the same people. This is in Islam. And also what I want to go into now is you have a culture that is now being influenced by this same situation, which is hip hop. You know, hip hop at this point is pretty much a culture that is ran and produced and promoted by the white Jews, the proselytes. From every, you gotta realize, every man, every black man that is a rapper at this point, at some point, has effeminate tendencies. You gotta realize, conscious rappers are seen as being very masculine. From the Rakims, the Karas, the ones, the Nas, the Jazzos. These are, these are conscious rappers. Talib Kweli, Mos Def. They're not homosexual. Because homosexual, you're effeminate. And that, it doesn't go together. You can't be conscious and homosexual at the same time. Because you're not conscious of your situation, how that produced that. So, looking at that, you have to find a way to take away consciousness, to take away a black uprising. And what do? You implement the need to destroy the black family, because there is no procreation coming from a man and a man, a woman and a woman. That what we call in the Waka was the Xing out. You X out yourself because you don't procreate. So that's an issue. And what we tend to do now is, as a people, because we're very enculturated. That term enculturated is, I use it a lot because we say we have culture, and we do have culture. I agree with that. We have culture. We have a culture that was created based on enculturation. If I say, well, so what exactly is our culture? Our culture is whatever Europeans say it is. Whatever Europeans say you're supposed to co-sign, that's your culture. Whatever Europeans say it is, that's your culture. If you're supposed to say homosexuality is okay in your family, you're going to say it. If you're going to say that, it's okay to continue to allow them to beat and murder your people, and you turn the other cheek, you're going to say that's okay too. You're not going to fight. You understand? So we have an issue that we're not really attacking, and that's the problem. You can't wear an ankh and be gay. Think about it. What does an ankh represent? Ankh represents life. This is what? This is the womb, Stargate. This is the what? Fallopian tubes, the children. And this is supposed to be what? The phallus. There is no two men in this, and there's no two women in this. So divine order, or ma'at, and from a simplified form, is man and woman procreating. You understand? Heart is weighed. Heart is weighed on intentions and action. You understand? It's going to be extremely heavy when you have to explain to self, because the ancestors are nothing but a manifestation of you, that you did not want to procreate. You understand? So when people say they are born this way, my question is, at what point were you molested or influenced at some point at what point did you push out this situation that happened? Because a lot of times what we do is we don't even talk about it. We just pretend it didn't even happen. And then when someone says, well, you're born as well, well, since you said that's what happened, then I'll roll with what you said. That's what we do. You follow? So what I want people to understand is that, again, this is European in thought. And also, I don't have a slide, but I'm just gonna give y'all a brief rundown on just medium. Remember, there's no television back in ancient Africa, there's no newspapers. So the main medium was what? Artwork, right? So if you go back to ancient artwork, you saw artwork of warfare, when you go back to Menes and Namir, when he pushed out the Assyrians and you see him, taking their head and cutting their head off, that's artwork. This is their community, it's like their television. You go back to ancient, Greece, you saw artwork where two men were having sex. This is their way of communicating to their people. My art is my way of communicating to you. You understand? And so when you see that, as far back as they go, and this is National Geographic admits this from a brother. I remember a brother 2 weeks ago when I went to go see the brother Irritated Genie. He talked about, and he gave quotes that whites prior to Africans, the only reason why they would even have sex with a woman was to be in hopes of having another man-child to have sex with. Wow. This is in their information. You understand? You have with the word, every time I mention this word, people laugh. It's called the word pitching woo. It's pitching. Word pitching is like you're like if as we call it, macking on a woman, you're pitching. And woo is a form of sex, affection. So what men as young as 9 were broken in by older men. This was their culture. Remember, homosexuality literally as a definition, as a base definition, is the act of two people of the same gender, oral or anal acts. Because I don't even call it sex, it's acts. Sex produces child. Right. What they're doing is not producing anything. Also, when you go online, you have something that's called the dark web, where, and I talked about this on the Rex 84 class, the dark web has websites where you have white pedophiles lined up, and then next to them were black girls and boys that they were seeking after. They had the addresses of them on the dark web. I mean, and this is because we don't protect our children. We might protect ourselves, but we don't protect our children. And the European knows this. So that's one of the main things we have to learn how to start doing is protecting our children from European influence, whether it be in television, whether it be in the movies. And Brother Samantha Kemp brought up, and the dichotomy and the paradigm of making black men wear dresses. And I talked about this earlier with Brittany. We were talking about Flip Wilson. We were saying, if you notice, Flip Wilson made a lot of money being a woman.
Yeah.
Tyler Perry made a lot of money being a woman. Black men don't make a lot of money being black men. We don't even know how to define what a black man is anymore. We don't want to define what it is anymore. We're afraid of offending people. Remember, Malcolm X was a very masculine man. Shaka Zulu was a very masculine man. Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, they're very masculine men. Khalid Muhammad, Dr. York, Farrakhan, Clarence 13X, you name it. These were strong masculine men. They didn't have effeminate tendencies. You understand? Because that's needed in order for us to see, because teachers are warriors. You're fighting against a system that's trying to eliminate you. So if you're a person that's not being taught to be a teacher and study knowledge of self, you're going to take on anything else that's around you. And if what's teaching you is the medium, which is the media, which is the television, and all they see is men thinking that it's easier to have more money if I dress and act like a woman, why should I want to be a teacher? What's the point? I'm always be broke being a teacher. I'm always teachers don't get that much support. But if I become a woman, I get support from everybody. If I become a homosexual, matter of fact, if I'm a homosexual, I can now tie myself with the LGBT community. I don't have to be black no more. I can just be gay. My political status changes. Because, as they want to say, we're homophobic. The word phobia is to be scared of something. I'm not scared of a homosexual, I just don't agree with it. It doesn't net procreation. What does it come from? It's unnatural.
It's unnatural.
It's unnatural. When you talk about, we're gonna get a little nasty right now. Not too nasty, but we're gonna go nasty. When you talk about the anus, nothing's supposed to go up. Only is the exit area. You have what's called the sphincter muscle. When the sphincter muscle was constantly being, I don't want to say what P, penetrated. What happens is that muscle gets loose. The muscle gets loose, and that's why a lot of homosexuals, when they get older, they tend to have to wear diapers. Because they destroyed their rectum.
Wow.
That's why the human body was not meant to be penetrated that way. Anyway.
Muscles are in place for a reason.
Exactly. It's meant to, when you hold it for a long time, but when you are penetrating that, you no longer hold it. It's destroyed.
They don't naturally contract. Yeah.
Exactly. Dr. Laila Africa did the foreword for the book Homosexuality and Feminization of the African Male by Dr. Baruti. That in the beginning of that book, he talks about that.
Wow.
He says if you have, that muscle was meant to be left alone. It wasn't meant to be penetrated that way. You know, that's how you know it's an unnatural thing. You understand? So we're not really paying attention to the influence on our culture, on our people. Because we call something culture that we've been given the choice to have. They gave you culture. They gave you Christianity, they gave you Young Thug, and they gave you Chitlins. You know, black culture is European influence. If you really think about it, black culture is European influence. The most deadliest thing you can talk about right now that will get you hurt is homosexuality in white folks. White folks don't like to be analyzed. The moment you analyze white folks, you get hatred from all angles, from whites and blacks. You understand? That's why most blacks are trying to find a place in white supremacy. They don't want to destroy it. That's why most blacks are like, well, it don't matter what race you marry, it's still love. No matter who's together, it's still love, right? It don't matter whether it's two men or two, same thing. That's why you got clips of black homosexuals running around with red, black, and green flag. Garvey wasn't a homosexual. He was against that. So why are you allowing homosexuals to ride with a flag? Make your own flag. Matter of fact, go with them. Don't try to come with us, go with them. So that we can do what we need to do for ourselves. That's what we need to do. If you identify yourself as being gay, a whole different, or homosexual from a different political status, why do you want to be around us? We're trying to procreate. What do you want to do? That's my question. What do you want to do? So, again, and then going into the he and hermaphrodite gene, the asexual beings that manifest themselves, that is a 1 percentile in Africa. Okay? Hatshepsut was not a lesbian. All right? She was a male ruler in Pharaoh. She was not a lesbian. Okay? Atun was not bisexual, or he was not homosexual. But he was a hermaphrodite, male and female genitalia. But he did not like men. There's no historical evidence to prove this. Okay? What we got to stop doing is we got to stop learning ancient Africa from a European perspective. Okay, we have enough authorities on ancient Kemet, from our father Dr. York to Dr. Ben to Dr. Clark to Ashwa Kwesi. Got too many of them, but you still want to listen to white folks. And they're going to give you what they want to give you. They will never own up to their establishment. They will never own up to the pedophilia that they created from their culture. Because then you have to actually account for what you've done to our people. You understand? There's still just things like looking at the things that a lot of our black women do. A lot of them don't know no better because a lot of them are single and there's no man around. You have the white boys that come around and they have these camps. You think they're going to a football camp. Next thing you know, your child becomes effeminized by some white boys. You understand? Vacation Bible school that our people create and that we own, that we deal with every summer a lot of times, house pedophiles. Thing is, we house a lot of, we're not homophobic at all. We house a lot of things. Think about it. If you were homophobic, you would have been put out. Black people would have already exposed the pedophilia and homosexuality in the black church. If you really had a phobia about it. There's no phobia going on. But the reality is that we house a lot of it because we think we've been told that it's a natural process, that it's okay, I'm born that way. So we don't look that at some point you have influence sexually, and then you have a problem where genetically now, because of what we're on in slavery, and that's in the book The Dog Scroll by my father Dr. York, and in Our Bondage by Dr. York, which is a book that a lot of people skip over when it talks about the raping of black male slaves or white slave masters. Okay? And now we want to sit here and co-sign something that is a reflection of our enslavement. Again, homosexuality in the black community is a reflection of our enslavement. Until you can produce the evidence of an African tribe that was homosexual, that's exactly what it is. Because to this day, you cannot find a tribe and point it out. If that's the case, then go into any African country, from the islands of Jamaica to Africa. Why is Mugabe so adamant against it if it's natural? Had nothing to do with him being a Muslim. Why do they have names for it in the islands of Batsy Boy and stuff like that? Why are they like, well, this is a person that is what it is, and they're against it? Because this is a reminder of what happened to them during colonialism and slavery. Yeah, remember, you have memory that they still keep from Brazil to the islands of what happened to them. Again, the medium, because they painted. So you remember, we done went from like ancient Africa, where you had the carvings, the sculptors. Same thing with the Europeans carving sculptors. So we're jumping into slavery, where now they're painting what went on. So they let you know what you call